Yo, what's up, y'all? It's Cone back here again tonight with another video. Today, I want to talk about a player that I feel like doesn't get enough love on a team that also just doesn't get enough love in the NBA, and that is Donovan Mitchell and the Utah Jazz. If you're wondering why we're talking about him, is because he's kind of the hottest player in the NBA right now, and no one's really talking about him, at least not from what I've seen, and I follow around 11,000 accounts on Twitter, probably even more at this point last time I checked. So, we should talk about him a little bit more. He's a guy that is making a legitimate case to be the best player in the world at his position. And if you don't believe me, let me break it down for you. First, let's start off with what Donovan Mitchell has been doing recently. Now, over the course of this season, he's kind of struggled early on with his shooting percentages, as did pretty much everyone in the league. Some people are still kind of figuring it out. A lot of people have started to kind of work their way back, and Donovan Mitchell is one of those guys that has really started to figure it out. The Jazz are currently on a 5-game win streak, last night beating the Minnesota Timberwolves by 32 points, destroying them. Donovan Mitchell only played 34 minutes, 36 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. A dominant effort from a guy who continues to dominate. His shooting percentage is in that game too. Like I said, he's kind of been finding his jumper a little bit more. 14 of 23 from the field, 5 of 12 from 3. He also had 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block. Just an all-around great game from a player that continues to ball out. He just won Player of the Week, and he's kind of already making a case to be named it again in the Western Conference. When we look at his last 4 games in addition to that is when things start to get really crazy. Against the Pelicans, 21 points, 9 of 17 shooting, 3 of 6 from 3, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. Trailblazers, 30 points, over 50% shooting, 3 of 8 from 3, 2 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals. 34 points, 35 points, making 6 and 4 threes in those 2 games. Donovan Mitchell is going crazy. His cumulative stats over the last 5 games, 31.2 points per game, and that's crazy for a 5-game stretch. 3.6 rebounds per game, 5.2 assists per game, 1.5 steals, half a block, and he's shooting 57% from the field and 44% from 3 in these last 5 games. He is dominating in every facet of the game, and he's been super fun to watch. He's been the hottest player in the league over these last 5 games, and no one's really talking about him. I don't see much about him, much about the Utah Jazz, and I don't know whether him not being talked about much is just kind of a byproduct of playing in Utah or the reputation that the Jazz have, where they're chokers, they can't get it done in the playoffs. Those reputations don't matter for what's happening right now with Donovan Mitchell. If you have that thought, sure, whatever. I can't change your mind. But still, what he and Utah Jazz are doing right now, which is balling out over these last 5 games, is super impressive. And over the course of this season, Donovan Mitchell is the best he's ever been. He continues to improve, even if the numbers don't quite look like it so far because of his slow start. He, right now, on the season, is, like I said, his 3-point percentage is on the rise very rapidly, and it looks like he's kind of found that shooting stroke. It doesn't have to stay around the 44% it's been in the last 5 games, but I do think it is sustainable that his 3-point percentage is going to continue to rise, and I could see him shooting a career high from 3 once this season is said and done. Also this year, Donovan Mitchell has always been good at getting to the rim, but there's always been room for improvement, as there always is, for finishing around the rim. He is shooting 74% at the rim this season, as like a just over 6-foot guard at the shooting guard position. He is dominating at the rim. He's going straight at guys. No one can really stop him. He's super athletic, as he has always been, but he's craftier, and it feels like he's much more consistent finishing around the rim than he's ever been. Something else that he's been doing a really good job of is facilitating. He has a career high in assist percentage, which, if you didn't know, is just basically a stat that kind of tells how many of your teammates' shots you assist while you're on the court, and he has a career high in that. His playmaking looks much improved. He's doing a better job of limiting turnovers in the last few games. He's kind of hovering right around his career mark for turnovers on the season, but as of recently especially, he's been limiting them a little bit more. And he looks much more comfortable passing the basketball, which I do think is the next development in his game. He's always been a great scorer. That's always been clear. But his playmaking has always been something that could use a little more work. And if he is able to playmake a bit more, this Jazz team goes from a really good team to one of the best. Well, they've been one of the best teams in the NBA the past few seasons, but they get even scarier if his playmaking continues to rise. He's a better passer, he's setting up teammates really well, and his team overall is 8 points worse with him off the floor offensively. And for a team that is really high-powered offensively like the Jazz, that's a high number. I know he's really good, but that's still a high number. If you want to see how good this Jazz team is offensively and how much Donovan Mitchell and just the Jazz in general are producing like wide open looks and good shots at a high volume, the Utah Jazz are the first team ever in NBA history ever, and this is no stipulations, to make 20 or more threes in 3 straight games. These last 3 games. That's ridiculous. 20 or more threes is a lot in 1 game, or even 2 out of 3 games. That would be ridiculous. To make it in 3 straight games is out of control. Obviously, it's the first time it's ever happened. And so Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz are just balling out. And when you look at Donovan Mitchell, when you look at all these things that I'm talking about, when you look at this 5-game stretch that he's on, you kind of have to consider, is he the best shooting guard in the NBA? Now, a few names probably come to mind when I talk about shooting guards, so I'll talk about a few of the top guys at the shooting guard position and kind of present why I think Donovan Mitchell has a really convincing case. First, a lot of y'all probably thought of Paul George. He's not a shooting guard. He's a small forward. If he is a shooting guard, then I think he's the best shooting guard in the NBA at the moment, but he's a small forward. He's played most of his minutes by far at small forward over the course of this year. He is a small forward. So Paul George is out of the equation. The guy that probably comes to a lot of people's minds when I mention a shooting guard is James Harden, because for the longest time he has been by far and away clearly the best shooting guard in the NBA. But he hasn't been very good this season, and he's still been a solid player, but by James Harden standards, he's not been phenomenal. His efficiency is down. He doesn't quite look as quick as he typically is. Those step back 3-point shots just aren't quite falling. His efficiency is down, and it hasn't really shown a lot of signs of improving. It has gotten better, but not to the level that Donovan Mitchell has been cooking. So I don't think he beats out Donovan Mitchell at this point. Obviously, he still is a very good player, and over the course of the year, he could definitely get back to that title. But for right now, I think he probably is below Donovan Mitchell from what I've seen so far this season. This is just right now in this moment. Bradley Beal is another guy that probably comes to mind. He's not been great. His shooting percentages are down. His points per game are down a lot. He's not as good defensively as Donovan Mitchell, and I just don't think he's been as good. His team's not as good. I know wins aren't a player-specific stat, but I think Bradley Beal, Donovan Mitchell's just ahead of him at this moment. Devin Booker is someone I think you could definitely make an argument for. Him and Mitchell are pretty close. His team does have a better record, but he has missed a few games. And even so, his stats are a little worse than Donovan Mitchell's across the board. His efficiency is a little bit up, I believe, from 3-point range. But overall, I think those 2 guys are kind of the guys that you have to kind of look at when you talk about the best shooting guard in the NBA. And I think Donovan Mitchell makes a really, really strong case. This 5-game stretch has been phenomenal. He's helping his team. He's elevating them to be one of those top teams in the Western Conference like they were last season. Despite only starting off 12-7, they're now 17-7. And not only that, but we've been talking all season about how the Warriors and the Suns are by far the best 2 teams in the Western Conference. And I do think they are the best 2 teams in the West at this moment. They've got the best records. They've been playing great basketball, not just individually, but team-wise. They're probably the best 2 teams in the West. But the Jazz are right behind them. They're right there. They're only 3 games back, which I didn't believe at first. Because the Jazz have just kind of felt like they're maybe not floundering, but they haven't been quite as dominant as they were last season. And so I just didn't think they would be right there. And they are. They are right there, right behind those top 2 teams. And if they can pass them, the Jazz, Donovan Mitchell might be an MVP candidate with the way that he's playing. Of course, he's going to have to keep up a really high level of play because we've got a lot of guys like Curry, Giannis, Kevin Durant making their cases. But Donovan Mitchell, if the Jazz have the best record in the West with a lot of tough teams, I think you start to put him in that conversation for winning MVP. So all this to say, Donovan Mitchell's on fire, and I really feel like I haven't seen anyone talking about it. I know there's the whole narrative around the Utah Jazz. I know a lot of people just don't like the Utah Jazz, whether it's because of the Rudy Gobert Mike incident or just because you like to make fun of them for being chokers. Whatever it is, I know a lot of people don't like the Jazz, but Donovan Mitchell is playing some really, really good basketball, and I think it's time for us to kind of appreciate him and start to think about him as maybe the best shooting guard in the world. those are my thoughts on the Utah Jazz and Donovan Mitchell. Let me know what you think. Do you agree that he is the best shooting guard in the world? Did you know that he was going crazy like this before I made this video? To Jazz fans, I apologize if I curse you. If you didn't know, on this channel, I kind of seem to curse teams or players when I talk about them. So hopefully I don't curse Donovan Mitchell, because he's been super fun to watch over the course of this year, and I would love to see him continuing to make a name for himself as a potential MVP candidate. He's definitely giving me an all-star. I think right now he's on an all-NBA team if I had to make some. Of course, that's just off the top of my head, but I really don't see any other guys that I would put above him in terms of the guard positions. There's 6 of them. He has been a top 6 guard so far over the course of this year. But all in all, I appreciate y'all watching. Let me know what you think about the Jazz, and more specifically Donovan Mitchell, in the comment section below. I will see you all later. Real one, say it back.